Welcome to another episode of Discograffiti's wildly in-depth Beach Boys series and Your Dreams Come True, where Brian Wilson freaks like you and me get our chance to delve deep into the barely believable history and prodigious discography of my favorite band of all time, and also coincidentally the best, along with a slew of over 50 top-shelf guests, ranging from musicians inspired by their work, family members, documentary directors, songwriting collaborators, Beach Boys authors, producers, touring band members, and for good measure, some of the Beach Boys themselves. I'm your host, Dave Gebroe, and special thanks goes out to co-producers Chuck Granata, Dennis Dyken, and Mark Freed, without whom this series would not have happened. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on the career of legendary producer and studio head Lenny Waronker, along with our special guest, the man himself, Lenny Waronker. Initially intended solely as a deep dive discussion on Dyke Parks' majestic debut record Song Cycle, the first album Lenny ever produced, this, of course, turned into something else entirely, a 5.5-hour career-spanning interview with one of the kindest, most honest and vulnerable human beings who ever set foot in the music industry. Initially also intended as part of our Beach Boys and Your Dreams Come True series, it felt far too important not to stand on its own. Part 2 focuses on the first album that Lenny ever produced, Dyke Parks' legendary debut LP, Song Cycle. Here are just a few of the many things that Lenny discusses with Discograffiti in this podcast. The myriad of influences that made up the cultural stew that was Song Cycle. The mind frame of boundless largesse and expense that went into the making of the record. The real reason why Van Dyke covered Donovan's Colors, and the reason he used an alias when it was released as a single, Lenny's dalliance with amphetamine, and what it did for him at the time that he otherwise had difficulty doing for himself. Van Dyke's need to obfuscate his own voice on a record so dependent on being able to understand its lyrical virtuosity, the current state of Lenny and Van Dyke's friendship, and an in-depth deep dive on every song off side 1 of Song Cycle. And away we go then! And look, I think, honestly, the project was going to collapse due to the internal pressures that Brian was feeling anyway. Like, is there any sense of culpability in, being even an infinitesimal part of the collapse of the project? Even though it wasn't you, obviously, this was going to be Brian, no matter what.
You're talking about Smile.
Yeah.
No, I never felt that way.
Good.
It never came to mind because what I knew wasn't that much different than what most people knew. Van Dyke is not somebody who's going to talk about a situation where there's chaos and whatever. He was very careful, always.
Yeah. By the way, how instrumental was Mike Maitland to Dyke Parks being signed over Joe Smith?
I'm not sure Mike was still there. Oh, yeah, he was. But no, it was Joe and Mo. And Mo really became, a big flag waver, whatever it is, of Van Dyke's. Was incredibly helpful to Van Dyke over the years, supportive.
Okay, you knew this time was going to come. We're actually going to talk about the record.
Okay.
We've been everywhere but here, but I feel like, it's if there's any record that it's deserving of the drum roll, and you have just heard the record extremely recently. It came out November 1967. It's 32 minutes and 39 seconds, which would now be considered an EP, and is actually named after the 19th century classical format. Right? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I used to know about it.
So it's an autobiographical concept album, and more on that in a minute. It's centered on Hollywood and Southern California. It blends, in case you haven't heard it, which would be shocking if you're this deep into the series and you actually haven't heard the record. It blends orchestral pop with elements of Tin Pan Alley songwriting. There's bluegrass, ragtime. There's concrete. And, lyrically, we're looking at something that was, very influenced by the Beat Poets, James Joyce, Ferlinghetti, E. Cummings, with a dash of Bob Dylan. And I do love the provisional title of the record, which was Looney Tunes. And again, which, not only references the label that he's on with the cartoons, but the cartoon consciousness, which was the aesthetic holdover from Smile.
Well, there's another thing that Van Dyke never told me about. I wished he had. Not that it would have affected me, but it might have. He was a big fan of Spike Jones and just loved what Spike Jones was doing, bringing humor into music in a sophisticated way, because Spike Jones was a hell of a musician. I knew that because my father knew him. And so I used to get the Spike Jones stories from time to time. That had an effect on Van Dyke as it relates to his arrangements, his song cycle. There are whistles going off, but it's not alert. It's just a touch, which I missed. And I was a big Spike Jones fan.
Not just the whistles, by the way, but there's a lot of sound effects, like, the trunk being opened, there's the birds twittering. There's all these effects that make it sound like a movie.
Yeah, I mean, the beginning of Colors with the...
we'll talk about... we'll get to that. Man, do I love that.
Oh, man.
At the end,
that was the beginning.
Yeah.
The beginning of Song Cycle was really Colors.
Yeah. But before we get to that, because I really want to talk at length about that, because I love that whole story, and I love the Nom de Plume. Everything about that is almost like a whole podcast in itself, just talking about George Washington Brown and what all that was about. But and before we talk about the team that was involved, I would love to know, because I always thought that he had a label-sponsored retreat in Palm Desert to write the album. But then at your initial meeting, he had a bunch of the songs done. So was the music composed and he was just going to Palm Desert to write the lyrics? Is that what was happening?
Oh, no, I think he was writing the songs.
Okay. So it just wasn't all completed by the time.
No, but you could tell. He played the Attic. I remember some of it. The Attic, he had maybe Widow's Walk. I'm not sure.
So this is recorded over 7 months with over 50 session musicians contributing, including obviously the Wrecking Crew, but then a whole slew of other people. Was this at this point the most expensive album ever made? Or just one of them?
Ever made? No, not even close. I mean, it was the most expensive album. I got in trouble for this.
I mean, at the time it was approximately $80,000, which is equivalent to about $750,000 now.
The amount of studio time and all the stuff that we were trying to do, some which worked and some that didn't. But I knew it. I knew, I was cruising for a bruise, in a sense.
Yeah. You definitely were. There's no question about that.
I just shut it down. I kept saying, no, keep going. This is going to be good, regardless. It's good. And if you're involved with something that's good and special, there'll be a payoff sometime.
Yeah.
And there was.
Here it is. This episode is your payoff. All All right, that concludes your free sneak peek into today's bonus episode. If you want to hear the rest of it, just visit patreon.com/Discograffiti and either purchase this podcast by itself for $4, or better yet, subscribe at the major tier and get access to Discograffiti's 3 weekly episodes. That's Friday's main episode, the Sunday Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. That's our podcast within a podcast featuring Patreon members as guests, and your Tuesday bonus episode. Please keep in mind this is entirely how I support my wife and 7-year-old son, so don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not supporting Discograffiti. Become a member so you don't miss a single thing at patreon.com/Discograffiti.